Hello and welcome to attempt 3 of this lesson. I'm very much hoping that it's going to work this time. So we are doing suspenseful writing this week, and this is the scene we are describing. We are going to be trying to use our relative clauses that we've been looking at. We're going to try and use figurative language, and we're going to try and write. So it is mysterious, full of the unknown, and create suspense in our writing. So this is the scene we're describing. It is our forest that is being surrounded by fog or mist. There's so many things in that scene which we don't know, which does make it mysterious and suspenseful. Okay, so if you have got some notes or some work that you have done either yesterday or the day before, make sure you have them close to hand, because they might be really useful today, especially your list of nouns that you were describing, or the list that you had written down that you could describe when you are thinking about this piece of writing. Before we start looking at our activities for today, our writing activities, I'm just going to introduce to you some sentences that some past classes have written when writing about similar scenes to the one we are looking at. So our first one is: twisted, frightened trees are a prison, keeping sunlight out. So we have an example of a metaphor there, because we're saying that the frightened trees are a prison. So comparing them to something else by saying they are that thing. The next sentence starts with an adverb sentence starter. So adverbs, remember, they describe verbs. Rapidly, the fog, which watches every movement, covers the haunted mansion. So this is a really good sentence, not just because of the different sentence type we've started with, but the fact that it's got a relative clause and that it's got personification in there, because it's saying that the fog is watching. Fog doesn't watch, humans watch. The fog does not have eyes, so that's personification. Our next example sentence, so same adverb sentence starter, we've got rapidly, the fog becomes a trap, covering the ramshackle mansion, which wore a disguise. So we've got the metaphor of it being a trap, and then we have our relative clause at the end, using our relative pronoun, which, so which wore a disguise. So two things in that sentence that are really good. The next sentence is covering the path, the fog trapped the disguised haunted mansion. So we've got some powerful vocabulary in there. So disguise, so it's tricking whoever's looking at it into thinking maybe it's something else. And then we have a preposition sentence starter. So remember, a preposition tells you the position of something, so where it is. So when you're describing something, using a preposition is a really good way to start your sentences, to allow the reader to know where those things are. Then we have slowly, the fog covers a path that leads to safety, while simultaneously revealing a path that leads towards an unknown destination. So we've got some relative clauses in there, and we have some powerful vocabulary. We've got simultaneously, which means at the same time, and we've got our adverb sentence starter. Next sentence is: rapidly, the fog covers the path in front of me as the solemn sky is invaded by furious clouds. So we have our adverb sentence starter, we have our alliteration with solemn sky, and we have our pathetic fallacy, because they have given the clouds an emotion, those furious clouds. That is a type of pathetic fallacy where we're giving something a human emotion. The last example we're going to look at that was written in the past by a student is: as dark as the night, the sky rapidly turned inky black, whilst mysterious creatures chitter in the undergrowth. So what's really good about that sentence is it has a simile, and it's used a simile as a sentence starter. So varying your sentence starters are really important. You do need some that are simple sentences, so maybe starting with the, just so it doesn't get too complicated, but it's really good if you are varying what you're starting your sentences with. Okay, we're going to introduce a new piece of vocabulary. Hopefully you've got used to how this works. I'm going to give you a new word and then 3 potential definitions for you to choose from. Our word today is poignant, and I've got 3 potential definitions for this word. The first one, A, is to reject or sharply criticize. The child poignanted the idea that they were not smart enough to overcome the challenge. B, poignant is a small vase. The flowers were placed in a small poignant on the kitchen windowsill. Or is it C? Poignant is something that is keenly distressing to the emotions. The photographs were a poignant reminder of happier times. So just pause the video here and decide if you think poignant means A, to reject or sharply criticise, B, it is a small vase, or C, it is to keenly distress, or it is something that's keenly distressing to the emotions. So just pause the video here. Also, I check that I'm still recording, so we don't want that to happen again. Okay, so hopefully you've written down what you think it is. The correct definition for poignant is something that is keenly distressing to the emotions. So the correct sentence there where poignant is used correctly is the photographs were a poignant reminder of happier times. So today we're going to look at different parts of the scene and think about how we can describe it without saying certain words. So there'll be certain words we'll put in the word jail that you cannot use. We're also going to think about how we could use figurative language. So one thing I'd like you to do is to watch this video. So I've got the link up there, or you can just search on YouTube for that Chris Malinchak. I probably said that wrong. And the video is so good to me. So I want you to watch that and decide what you think the suspense is. What is the ellipses? What is the unknown thing in that video that you have to wait all the way to the end to find out what is in that video that you don't know? What's the unknown? Okay, so now what I want you to do is just pause the video and write down as many different types of figurative language that you can think of. So just give yourself 60 seconds, pause the video, and then restart the video and see how many you've got. Okay, so here are the types of figurative language that we have talked about so far. We have got personification, so giving something a human action. We've got pathetic fallacy, which is a type of personification, but it is giving something a human emotion. So you have angry clouds, for example. We have similes, so comparing something to something else by saying it is like something or as something as a. We have metaphors, which is saying something is something else or some things are something else. We have hyperbole, which is over-exaggeration. So if you said its tail was as long as a winding river, something's tail most likely isn't as long as a river, but you're just exaggerating to show that it is actually really long. Then we have alliteration, which is sounds at the start of the words sounding the same when they are next to each other. And then finally we have onomatopoeia, which is a type of sound effect. So crash, bash, bang, they might all be sound effects, so onomatopoeia in your writing. Okay, I've got an example paragraph here which contains some figurative language, so I'm going to read it to you. And then I'd like you to give yourself 3 minutes to just consider where the figurative language is in this paragraph. So I'm going to read it to you, then pause the video, decide where you think the figurative language is and what type it is. Angry clouds hovered above their heads. Gnarled branches reached across their path. The silence was an ever-approaching wall, intermittently broken by the wind whistling through this forgotten place. Crack! Something moved behind them and quickly disappeared like the light of a blown-out candle. So pause the video, decide where the figurative language is and what type of figurative language it is. I have highlighted the figurative language here in red. So I'm just going to go through the 6 different types of figurative language we have used here. So we have angry clouds, and hopefully you know that that is pathetic fallacy. So I've given those clouds a human emotion, so that's pathetic fallacy. Then we have gnarled branches reaching across their path. Branches cannot reach, that is a human action. So that's the type of personification. Next, we have the silence was an ever-approaching wall. I'm saying the silence is something else, so that is a metaphor. We then have the wind whistling through the forgotten place. So we've got 2 types of figurative language in one there, because we've got wind whistling, which is a type of alliteration, and we have the wind whistling, which is a human action, so that's another type of personification. The next type of figurative language we have in there is onomatopoeia, because we've got crack, which is a sound effect. So onomatopoeia there. And then finally, we have like the light of a blown out candle, which I'm sure you have noticed is a type of simile. Okay, so make sure you have your list of nouns for parts of the forest that you're going to describe. Remember, we're describing those using the 5 senses. So what can you hear? What can you see? What can you taste? What can you feel? What can you smell? So think about all those things and have your list ready. And if you don't, just make another quick list of all the things in the forest you could describe. And I'll put some examples up there, and we're going to think about what we could compare them to. We're going to go through a few of them now, just to give you some more ideas. Before that, I'm just going to show you some examples of figurative language that I have come up with to describe this scene. So my first one is the fog is a blanket, rapidly consuming the forest and all light within. So that is a type of metaphor, because I'm saying that the fog is something else. The next one is the dusty pathway is never ending. So I've used hyperbole there, which is over exaggerating, because the path obviously does end at some point, but I've said it's never ending to make it sound like it goes on forever and ever and ever, which is a type of hyperbole. The next one is the depths of the forest are as cold as a witch's icy heart, which penetrates your soul. Just noticed a mistake there. See if you can spot it. So here we've used a really powerful simile. So I haven't just said it's as cold as ice. I've given you an example of something which would be really cold, and we often describe witches' hearts as being cold. And then we have a relative clause at the end there. And then my fourth example is obsidian towers reach ever skywards as their anchors tear at the ground beneath my feet. The obsidian towers here are the trees. So that is a metaphor, because I've used another name for them. I'm calling them obsidian towers. Obsidian is a type of black. So obsidian towers reaching. So I've got that metaphor for obsidian towers. And then I've got my personification, because once again, I'm saying they're reaching, and that's a human action. And then finally, I've got another type of metaphor here by saying that the tree's anchors tear at the ground beneath my feet. So I want you to think about what could possibly be the anchor for those trees. What's holding them in place, like the anchor does for a boat? It stops it drifting away. What is holding those trees in place so that they don't fall over and they don't move? So it's its roots. The roots are the anchors. So that's another type of metaphor, because I'm calling the roots anchors instead of roots. Okay, so we're going to look at some different parts of that forest now and think about how we could describe them. So the first part we're going to look at is the trees. And you have a couple of words here in the word jail. You cannot say trees when you're describing them. And I'm also going to say that you cannot say branches or anything like that. So you can't say twigs either. So I want you to think about what they look like, and potentially are they making any sounds? So when I look at this big tree in this picture, I like to think of it as a hand. So if the tree is a hand, what are the long, gnarled, thin things that are reaching out and grabbing things from that hand? So if you look at your hand, what on there could grab things? Another thing you could think of to compare things to when you're trying to do figurative language is animals. So what animal could be long and thin and stretching out or slithering across the path to grab things? So just have a think about that and see if you can get any bits of figurative language down to describe that tree or the trees in the forest, making sure you don't use your words in your word jail. So no trees, branches or twigs to be mentioned at all. And if you are writing a little bit extra about the trees, just make sure you use a mixture of long descriptive sentences and short, sharp sentences to help create suspense. So hopefully you'll pause the video here and spend a few minutes just writing those down before you move on to the next one, which is the leaves. So I'm asking here, what is under the leaves? How can we describe what is under those leaves? And remember, you can't say what it is. So if there is a monster under those leaves, don't tell me it's a monster. Just describe something moving, whether you can see it or hear it. Just describe it. So what sounds are they making and how do they move? So something slithered beneath my feet. something was rustling under the leaves. What could it be? So you could use some rhetorical questions there as well. So once again, pause the video for a few minutes, see what figurative language you can come up with to describe what is happening under the leaves. What could you compare it to? What could you say it is without saying those words? Monster. The third one we're going to focus in on, obviously there's lots more that you can focus in on this picture, but we're just going to go through a few examples. We're going to think about how could we describe the fog. Your word jail for this is fog and mist, so you can't use those words, but you want to be thinking about what does the fog do? Does it move mysteriously? Does it make an eerie sound? So I like to think of the fog as maybe an impenetrable wall. So you could talk about an impenetrable white wall engulfed this place. Then I know that you're talking about the fog, but you haven't said fog, but the way you're going to describe it in your description, in your writing, is going to allow me as the reader to know that it's fog, but it's so thick it's like a wall. So just pause the video once again. What descriptions can you come up with for the fog that you could write into sentences and then use in your writing later on? When you are writing your description, it's going to be like a story. So I want you to put yourself into your story. And you'll notice once again, I think I've talked about this before, your words of the day is first person. And I'd probably concentrate on the past tense, make it so it's already happened. So the whole way through it's I did this, I did that, underneath me, next to me, behind me. So concentrate on that and don't say them or him or her. Concentrate first person story here. So something that will help you do that is thinking of as many different emotions as you can for how you might be feeling if you were in that situation. So if you imagine yourself transported into that woodland in the picture in the bottom right, what sort of emotions might you be feeling? It might be quite nice to imagine that you are somewhere else at the moment, considering we've been stuck inside for quite a while. So transport yourself there, write down a list of emotions, and then you can write them in your description, because remember, we could put them in short sentences, or we could have our dashes to emphasize how our character is feeling at that moment of time. Okay, so your activity today is to write sentences, including figurative language. And I want you to write at least 8 sentences. Obviously, if you can think of more than 8 sentences, please write them down. If you've got 15 amazing sentences, write them all down. I'd love to read them. Don't limit yourself, because if you've got 15, you only write 8. Tomorrow, when you come to write your full draft, your full text, you won't have as many things to use for your writing. You'll have to start all over again. So write down all of your ideas. So at least 8 sentences. You can write that on Teams on the document, or you can write it down and upload it to Tapestry. You can take a picture of your sentences and upload it to Tapestry. What I'd like you to do is, once you've written each sentence, underneath I'd like you to write the type of figurative language that you have used. So if you have a sentence with a simile in it, write your sentence, and then on the line below just write the word simile. If your next sentence, so leave a line for your next sentence, and then if you write it and it includes pathetic fallacy, so giving something human emotion like angry clouds, just write underneath your sentence, once you've finished it, pathetic fallacy. And you're trying to use each type of figurative language at least once. So I know it'd be very easy, I imagine, for most of you to reel off 8 sentences with similes in, but we're trying to use the different types of figurative language today. And once you've written them, we'll be able to use those in your writing tomorrow. And remember to keep thinking about your suspenseful technique. So how can you build suspense? How can you use those 3 dots, your ellipses? How can you use the unknown? How can you use short, sharp sentences? So 3 short, sharp sentences together are really powerful. So we could have, I froze, my heart pounded, I couldn't move, something like that. So 3 short, sharp sentences. How could you put them together to build suspense? And as you'll notice on the right, there's a challenge there for you. Can you come up with any rhetorical questions to include in your writing? Okay, thank you once again for listening to our lesson. I'm very much excited to hear what you have to say and to listen to your feedback on our feedback session. So thank you very much.